Hi friends, welcome. Here we discuss real stories told by real people. Today we have a story about a man who found out about his wife's cheating and came up with a very unusual solution. Let's see what happens. My name is Trevor, and my life changed in an instant. It was a warm autumn evening. I was sitting on the couch and idly flipping through the Facebook news feed. At that moment, I had no idea that in the next few minutes my world would turn upside down. I opened a message from Larry, my colleague and best friend. His message was short. "Trevor, look at this." Inside was a screenshot of my wife, Evelyn's correspondence with some man. I recognized his name, Oliver, right away. He was our neighbor and friend. Evelyn has always been a wonderful woman. Her golden hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her blue eyes sparkled with a living fire. She was charming and charismatic with an infectious laugh that I loved so much. We were married for 10 years, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. But these messages, they talked about meetings, about love and passion. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. "Larry, are you sure this is true?" I wrote without taking my eyes off the screen. "Yes, Trevor, I'm sorry to show this, but you should know," he replied. "This is Oliver. I've seen them together several times." They didn't notice me. I stared at the screen, trying to figure out how long it had been going on. Evelyn has always been attentive and caring. She never gave any reason to doubt, or maybe I just didn't want to notice. I tried to remember all her meetings with friends, long yoga workouts, and delays at work. All these excuses suddenly seemed suspicious to me. She began to leave the house often, leaving me alone with our son and daughter. I couldn't sleep that night. I turned around in bed, listening to Evelyn's steady breathing. Her face was calm. She was smiling in her sleep. How could she sleep so peacefully knowing that she had betrayed me? The next day, I tried to behave as usual. Evelyn and I were having breakfast together, and I was trying to find the words to start a conversation. "Evelyn, do you remember the last time we went on a date?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, Trevor, it's been so long," she replied, laughing. "Maybe this weekend." "Yes, I think that's a good idea," I nodded, hiding my pain. "I miss those days." She smiled, and at that moment it seemed to me that I was seeing the Evelyn I once loved again. But in the evening, everything changed again. Evelyn said she was going to meet a friend. "Trevor, don't expect me late," she said, putting on her favorite red dress. "We're going to sit in a new cafe." "All right, dear," I replied, restraining my indignation. "Be careful." When the door closed behind her, I sat down on the couch and looked at the screenshots again. I was furious inside, but I knew I had to act coolly. I had to find out the truth. I opened Facebook again and found Oliver's wife's page. Her name was Zoya, and I knew she deserved to know the truth as much as I did. I stared at Zoe's Facebook page for a long time, thinking about how to start a conversation. Her profile picture showed an attractive woman with short brown hair and thoughtful green eyes. There was a slight smile on her face, but there was fatigue in her eyes. I sighed and started writing a message. "Zoya, hello. My name is Trevor McAllister. We only know each other superficially, but I need to talk to you. This is about Oliver and Evelyn. I think they're cheating on us." I sent a message and, despite the late hour, hoped for a quick response. Inside, I was seething with a mixture of anger and anxiety. It took a few minutes before I heard the notification. It was a message from Zoe. "Trevor, hello. I got your message." "What do you mean?" I typed in the answer, trying to be as clear as possible. "I have evidence that our spouses are cheating on us with each other. This was confirmed to me by my friend and colleague Larry, who saw them together. I have screenshots of the correspondence." The pause was short. A few seconds later, Zoya wrote, "Send me these screenshots, please. I want to make sure. I sent her the screenshots that Larry sent. Almost immediately, the answer came. It's true. I've seen Oliver being secretive with his phone and often staying late at work. Thanks for letting me know, Trevor. You're welcome. It hurts me to realize it too, I replied. We have to do something. I can't just leave it like that. Zoya offered to meet to discuss further actions. We agreed to meet the next day at a cafe near her house. When morning came, I felt a little calmer. Evelyn and I had breakfast as usual. I watched her, trying to find the slightest hint of guilt in her behavior, but she remained just as friendly and caring. I have a lot to do today, she said, looking up from her cup of coffee. I'm going to the gym, and then I'm going to meet a friend. All right, dear. I'll be busy at work too, I replied, trying to look calm. I arrived at the cafe a little earlier than the scheduled time. It was quiet inside, so I chose a table by the window. A few minutes later, Zoya appeared. She looked tense but determined. She sat down opposite me and nodded in greeting. Thanks for coming, I said, feeling my heart beating faster. I also needed to talk to someone who understands what I'm going through, she replied. We have to do something. I can't let them keep doing this to us. I have an idea, I began, leaning closer. We can expose them. Let them feel what we feel. Zoya listened attentively, and a determined expression appeared in her eyes. What do you suggest? What is it? She asked, folding her hands on the table. We have to make sure that they see us together. They need to understand that their deception has been revealed. I explained. It won't be easy, but I think it's the best way. Zoya nodded, and a glimmer of hope flashed in her eyes. You're right. They should know that their betrayal has not gone unnoticed. Let's do this. We agreed to meet on Friday evening, when Evelyn and Oliver were planning to spend time together again. We have carefully thought out our plan and prepared for its implementation. I returned home with a heavy heart, but also with hope for justice. Now all that remained was to wait for Friday. Friday came and the tension reached its peak. Zoya and I prepared for the evening, which was supposed to put everything in its place. I tried to keep calm, but emotions were bubbling inside me. Zoya called me this morning. Her voice sounded determined. Trevor, I've got everything ready. Are we really going to do this? What is it? She asked. Yes, Zoya, we must. For our own peace of mind, I replied, trying to sound confident. Zoya looked great despite the stress of the last few days. Her brown hair was neatly styled, and her green eyes sparkled with determination. She was a strong woman, and I felt that we could handle this together. Good. I'll meet you at 7, as agreed, she said, ending the conversation. I've been on edge all day. Evelyn was at home and seemed completely carefree. She was smiling and laughing as if nothing had happened. I tried not to show my feelings, but it wasn't easy. Trevor, I'm going to Sarah's. Don't expect me early, Evelyn said, putting on her coat. All right, dear. Enjoy the evening, I replied, holding back my anger. When she left, I packed up and went to Zoya's. We agreed to meet at her house and go together. She was waiting for me at the gate, dressed in an elegant black dress that accentuated her slender figure. Are you ready? She asked as she got into my car. Yes, I'm ready, I replied, starting the engine. It took about 30 minutes to get to the bar. We didn't talk much. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts. Finally, we arrived and found a parking space. Remember, we have to act naturally, I said, looking into her eyes. We're just here for dinner. I get it. Zoya nodded, taking a deep breath. We entered the bar, trying to look like an ordinary couple. It was cozy and crowded inside. We found a table by the window where we could watch the entrance. After ordering drinks, we exchanged nervous smiles. Do you think they're here already? Zoya whispered, looking around. Most likely. Stay calm, I replied, trying to hide my excitement. We were drinking cocktails and talking about nothing until we noticed Evelyn and Oliver. They were sitting in a corner, deep in conversation. My heart sank, but I tried not to show my emotions. There they are, Zoya whispered, nodding in their direction. It's time to act, I replied, squeezing her hand in mine. We decided to play our part to the end. I leaned over to Zoya and whispered, let's pretend this is our date. It's time to start. She nodded, and we started having fun talking and laughing, pretending that we were happy together. After a while, I noticed that Evelyn and Oliver finally saw us. Their faces changed instantly, from surprise to horror. They're watching, Zoya whispered, squeezing my hand. Great, go on, I replied, encouraging her with a smile. Evelyn stood up, her face pale. She walked towards our table, her eyes full of anger and pain. Trevor, what's going on here? What is it? She asked, her voice trembling. We're just having dinner, Evelyn. Is this a problem? I replied calmly. Oliver followed, his face red with shame. Zoya, what are you doing here? What is it? He asked, trying not to look into her eyes. We came for a drink. Is it against the law? Zoya replied with a cold smile. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Trevor, you should have told me, she whispered. Say what, Evelyn? That you betrayed me, I replied, trying to stay calm. Oliver tried to say something, but Zoya interrupted him. Don't, Oliver. We all know. Your games are over. Evelyn turned away, tears streaming down her face. Oliver stood there, not knowing what to say. Zoya and I exchanged glances, realizing that our plan had worked. Let's get out of here, I said, getting up and holding out my hand to Zoya. We left the bar, leaving them alone with their emotions. Our mission was accomplished, and we knew that everything would change now. We left the bar, feeling the weight of the tension slowly subside. Zoya held my hand tightly, and I felt grateful for her support. We walked to the car without saying a word. Finally, when we got into the salon, Zoya spoke first. It was intense, she said, sighing heavily. Yes, I replied, starting the engine. But we did what we had to do. Now they know. We drove in silence, each immersed in his own thoughts. I could feel emotions boiling inside me. Anger, pain, relief, all mixed into one vortex. Finally, I couldn't stand it. Zoya, what are you going to do now? I asked, without taking my eyes off the road. I do not know, Trevor. I think I need time to think about it. And you? She looked at me with concern. I'm not sure either, I admitted. But I know one thing. I can't live a lie anymore. We deserve the truth. Zoya nodded, and we continued driving in silence. When we arrived at her house, she turned to me and took my hand. Trevor, thank you. I do not know what I would have done without your support, she said, her voice full of sincere gratitude. And thank you, Zoya. We handled it together, I replied, squeezing her hand back. We said goodbye and I drove home. On the way, I thought about everything that had happened. I had a long conversation with Evelyn, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But I was ready for it. We had to dot the I's. When I got home, Evelyn was already waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch. Her face was tear-stained, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked confused and vulnerable, and I felt my heart tighten in my chest. Trevor, we need to talk, she began, her voice trembling. Yes, Evelyn. We really need to talk, I replied, sitting down across from her. She sighed and looked at me. I know I made a terrible mistake. I do not know how it happened. It all started so innocently, but then it got out of control, she said, her eyes filling with tears. Evelyn, I want to understand why. Why did you do that? I asked, trying to stay calm. I felt lonely, Trevor. You've been so busy with work lately that we haven't had much time for each other. I don't justify my actions, but it was like an escape, she admitted. Evelyn, I also felt that we were moving away, but cheating is not the solution. It only made our problems worse, I replied, trying to suppress my anger. She lowered her head and began to cry softly. I could feel the pain and frustration tearing at me from the inside, but I knew we had to get through this. Trevor, I want to fix this. I'm ready to fight for our marriage, she said, looking into my eyes. Evelyn, I don't know if I can forgive you. We need time to think about everything and decide what will happen next, I replied, feeling a weight fall on my shoulders. We continued to talk, trying to find answers to questions that seemed endless. Our lives had changed forever, and we had to decide how to move on. Friday evening came, and Zoya and I were ready to execute our plan. We agreed to meet at her house at 19 o'clock. I arrived earlier this time to discuss the last details. Zoya met me at the entrance. She was wearing an elegant black dress that accentuated her slender figure. Her short brown hair was arranged in a neat hairstyle. There was determination in her green eyes. "Hey, Trevor," she said, smiling. "Yes, Zoya, I'm ready. How are you doing?" I replied, trying to maintain her confidence. "I'm a little nervous, but we'll manage," she admitted. We got into my car and went to the bar where Evelyn and Oliver were supposed to meet. The journey took about 30 minutes. We didn't talk much. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts. Finally, we arrived and found a parking space. "Here we are," I said, turning off the engine. "Are you ready?" "I'm ready," Zoya replied, taking a deep breath. We got out of the car and headed for the entrance. The bar was lively, with dim lights and quiet music in the background. We chose a table by the window from where we could watch the entrance. After ordering drinks, we exchanged tense glances. "Do you think they're here already?" Zoya whispered, looking around. "Most likely. Stay calm," I replied, trying not to show my excitement. We were drinking cocktails and talking about nothing until we noticed Evelyn and Oliver. They were sitting in a corner, deep in conversation. My heart sank, but I tried not to show my emotions. "There they are," Zoya whispered, nodding in their direction. "It's time to act," I replied, squeezing her hand in mine. We decided to play our part to the end. I leaned over to Zoya and whispered, "Let's pretend this is our date. It's time to start." She nodded, and we started having fun talking and laughing, pretending that we were happy together. After a while, I noticed that Evelyn and Oliver finally saw us. Their faces changed instantly, from surprise to horror. "They're watching," Zoya whispered, squeezing my hand. "Great, go on," I replied, encouraging her with a smile. Evelyn stood up, her face pale. She walked towards our table, her eyes full of anger and pain. "Trevor, what's going on here?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're just having dinner, Evelyn. Is this a problem?" I replied calmly. Oliver followed, his face red with shame. "Zoya, what are you doing here?" "What is it?" he asked, trying not to look into her eyes. "We came for a drink. Is it against the law?" Zoya replied with a cold smile. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Trevor, you should have told me," she whispered. "Say what, Evelyn, that you betrayed me?" I replied, trying to stay calm. Oliver tried to say something, but Zoya interrupted him. "Don't, Oliver. We all know. Your games are over." Evelyn turned away, tears streaming down her face. Oliver stood there, not knowing what to say. Zoya and I exchanged glances, realizing that our plan had worked. "Let's get out of here," I said, getting up and holding out my hand to Zoya. We left the bar, leaving them alone with their emotions. Our mission was accomplished, and we knew that everything would change now. It's been a week since our visit to the bar. Life was gradually returning to its routine, but the silence in the house seemed deafening. Evelyn and I barely spoke. It was like walking on thin ice, afraid to break it. One evening when I returned from work, Evelyn was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table. Despair was visible in her eyes. "Trevor, we need to talk," she said, lifting her head. "About what?" I replied, barely keeping my calm. "About us. About what's going to happen next." Her voice was trembling. I sat down opposite her. There was pain in her eyes, but also determination. I realized that I had destroyed our trust. "I do not know if we can fix everything, but I want to try," she said, barely pronouncing the words. "Evelyn, everything has changed. Our relationship will never be the same," I replied, looking into her eyes. She sighed and looked down at her hands, nervously intertwined. "I know, but I'm ready to work on it. Please give me a chance," she begged, her voice full of sincerity. "I need time. I can't answer right away," I said, feeling my heart tighten in my chest. Evelyn nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I understand. Thank you for at least listening to me," she whispered. The next day, I met Zoya. We decided to have coffee at a small cafe near her house. She was already waiting for me at a table by the window. Her face was focused. "Trevor," she said as I approached. "Hi, Zoya. How are you?" I replied, sitting down opposite her. "It's complicated. Oliver moved out. We filed for divorce," she said, her voice low. "I'm sorry," I replied, feeling her pain tighten in my chest. Zoya sighed and looked out the window. "And how are you and Evelyn?" "What is it?" she asked, looking into my eyes. "We're trying to talk, but it's hard. I do not know if I can forgive her," I confessed. "It's not easy," Zoya nodded. "But the main thing is that you're trying. I respect you for that." We drank coffee and talked about our feelings and experiences. Our conversations have become a kind of therapy, helping us deal with pain and frustration. The following week, I met Evelyn again. We agreed to discuss our next steps. She cooked dinner and tried to create a cozy atmosphere. "Thanks for coming, Trevor," she said as we sat down at the table. "We need to talk." "I'm ready to listen to you," I replied, trying to remain calm. Evelyn took a deep breath and looked into my eyes. "Trevor, I know I ruined everything. But I'm ready to fight for our marriage. I want us to be close again," she said, her voice full of sincerity. "Evelyn, it's going to be a long way. I do not know if I can forgive you completely, but I am ready to try," I replied, feeling my heart beating in my chest. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, Trevor. That's all I'm asking," she whispered. We continued to have dinner in silence, enjoying simple moments that previously seemed mundane. Our path to rebuilding our relationship was just beginning, and we had a long and difficult job ahead of us. The next day, I met Zoya again. We decided to take a walk in the park, enjoying the spring sun. She looked a little calmer, but there was still pain in her eyes. "How was your date with Evelyn?" "What is it?" she asked when we sat down on the bench. "Not bad. We decided to try to fix it," I replied, looking at her face. Zoya nodded and sighed. "That's good. I'm happy for you, Trevor," she said, her voice low. "And how are you? How are you coping?" I asked, feeling my heart tighten at her pain. "I'm trying. It's not easy, but I think things will get better over time," she replied, trying to smile. We sat on a bench, enjoying the silence and supporting each other during this difficult period. Our lives have changed forever, but we knew that together we could cope with any difficulties. So we have come to the end of this story. Please write your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you good luck.